I've produced a lot of these Sadler Stories videos and, of course, released them here in YouTube. Many of you have seen quite a few of them and perhaps commented on them or shared them or stuff like that. But one thing I've never actually talked about in this series is the story about how I got started with YouTube in the first place and what the first few years were like for me, the decisions that I made and why I did things the way that I did, maybe even some of the lessons that I learned along the way. And I have told this story, you could say piecemeal, sometimes as answers in AMAs or when I'm asked about it in interviews. But I don't think I've ever sat down and actually just like narrated the entire thing. So this could be interesting and useful perhaps for some people. Obviously, you don't want to take this as a blueprint for how to start a YouTube channel because the situation is very different now than it was back in those Wild West days of YouTube when it was first coming on the scene. And I should mention that when I say that, I don't mean like the very origins of YouTube. I effectively got into using YouTube around 2011. I may have uploaded some stuff earlier than that. I'm not quite sure. I'd have to go back and check. But so I'm going to tell you the story. And a lot of the story at the start is essentially my, at that time, fiance, now wife, Andi Sciacca, being sort of an early adopter of technology and, saying, you should try this out, and me being sort of a stick in the mud, not politically but temperamentally conservative and saying, it'll never work, why should I do this sort of thing, and then actually trying it and being kind of, at first, surprised, then amazed, and then heartened by the results. So there's a couple different inroads, and they all have to do with using what was called a flip cam. There was an actual company called Flip that made a very small portable camera that it was called a flip cam because this little arm would flip out and it had a USB thing on it, and you could plug it into your computer and download the video footage, the files off of it, and then edit them in that. And some of the later models you could upload in other ways, right? But generally you would just do it by connecting it to your computer. So Andi bought me a flip cam, and this is quite a while back. This was originally so that I could record time that I was spending with my kids on a summer vacation with them. And we did some of that. The flip cam didn't have like really great capacities as far as like video cameras go, but it was, pretty good for the moment. And they were very, very cheap. And why did Andi know so much about them? Well, she was always on top of technology to begin with, but she was also heavily involved at the Culinary Institute of America with the educational technology wing. She was an assistant dean at the time, and then eventually would be the founder of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And this is the kind of thing that you have at colleges and universities and institutes, where it's the people who help the teachers become better teachers. And a lot of that is introducing them to cutting edge technology. And so YouTube was kind of a small site at the time. The idea of recording lectures and then uploading them and providing them as researches, flipping the classroom was just coming into prominence. I won't say coming into being. So Andi, had a good idea about what you could use flip cams for. And my last semester at Fayetteville State University, where I was typically teaching a lot of critical thinking classes, she suggested to me that I should get what we call a spider tripod. It's a very small tripod that you could move the legs out easily, and you just screwed the flip cam onto it and you plunk it down on a desk, and then you just start recording, right? She said, why don't you start recording your class lectures and, providing them as resources to your students. You can upload them in YouTube, you can put them in other places. And actually, at that time, where to go with your lectures was kind of a problem because, the institution itself didn't have the storage capacity for uploading things and just storing them on their servers. So YouTube was a place to go. But YouTube at that time was only allowing individuals to upload at first 10 minutes, then 15 minutes, then 20 minutes videos. That's why when you see those really old YouTube videos, and it'll say like part 1 of 6, right? That's because they had to put a stop to it. Institutions like Fayetteville State University could have much longer uploads. So that's when, in philosophy, for example, Yale had its Yale courses, for example, Shelley Kagan on death, and they could be much longer, right? So I had the flip cam. I had the classes to, teach in. I had a classroom that at 8 o'clock was fairly engaging with the students, and the lighting was decent enough. And I told the students, this is what we're going to do. I had them sign FERPA releases. That's a law that protects student privacy. And I said, listen, your voices might be on this, but you're not going to have your faces or anything. It'll just be me in front of the chalkboard, and this will be helpful because if you miss a class or you have to skip for some reason, a medical appointment, going to court, dealing with your kids, then you can watch it later. And if you want to go back to it, you can also watch it later as well. And so that's one thing I started doing. And those videos are not actually in my channel. They're in Fayetteville State University's channel. And I also recorded a few other lectures that I did at the time that wound up in Fayetteville State University's channel. I think that they are probably the most watched videos of all time in their channel. They didn't really do much with video afterwards, unfortunately. But I had a good person to work with, Susan Hazeltine. I would record my class lecture and then come in, download it, shoot it over to her through email, I think it was, or maybe some sort of file uploading device, and then she would load it into YouTube, and then I would use it as a resource for my students. So that was going on. I also started shooting shorter videos, about like 15 to 20 minutes, that I called Dr. Sadler Chalk and Talks, basically because all the educational experts at the time who wanted to say something about video were telling us stupid things that they had no grounds for buying into. Like, you can't make a video longer than 5 minutes or students just won't watch it, right? Which turns out to be complete nonsense. They didn't know what they were talking about. They were just talking out of their proverbial butts. Or they would say things like, oh, it's got to be high production. Nobody wants to watch somebody in front of a chalkboard writing things on the board and lecturing. Chalk and talk is dead. So I was like, okay, we're going to do chalk and talk, and we're going to see whether or not people will watch it. And those I did upload in my channel. And then there were a few conferences that I did presentations at and some invited lectures as well, where I would set up the camera and record what I was doing for those too. So interestingly, the stuff in my channel took off. People liked it. People responded. People started subscribing. People were like, yeah, this guy is actually worth watching. The video quality isn't great. The sound quality isn't great. The lighting isn't perfect. There's pauses in there. There's a hiss that you can hear from the air conditioning or whatever it happens to be. But we like what he's shooting, so we'll watch him and keep on going with this. And in the Fayetteville State University channel, those critical thinking videos just took off. People started watching them all over the world and commenting on them. And this is the really cool part. Sometimes they'd be asking questions. They'd be like, I didn't understand this. Could you explain this a little bit more? Sometimes they would just be like, oh man, thanks. This is awesome. I love this, right? But a lot of the comments, this is the stuff that kept me going, were things like, thank you so much for posting this. I am in a class studying critical thinking, and my instructor won't explain this stuff. Or I can't understand anything this person says. Or, they don't seem to know what they're talking about, and you do. That was helpful. Then there were another set of comments that were really important to me and have remained very important to me throughout my work. It's from people who either went to college and missed that being in the classroom experience and wanted to brush up on stuff, or more commonly, people who were working or had other obligations and could not afford, in terms of time or money, to go to college. And they would be like, thank you for putting this out there. This is a free resource that I can use to better my own understanding. I can't afford to go to school right now or maybe ever. So you are giving me the possibility, at least with this one thing that we're studying here, to learn something. And that meant a lot to me. So, long story short, that my time at Fayetteville State University came to an end because I left there to go up and move in with Andi in Kingston, New York. We consolidated all of our books into this tiny little apartment. And, we were engaged at the time. We got married that fall while she was still working at the culinary, and I was teaching at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, so both on the same side of the river, just right up the road from each other. We'd often carpool to work. And at Marist, because I was now teaching in a philosophy department, no longer just in a philosophy program that mostly did critical thinking, but a real philosophy department, I had a wider range of classes that I would teach. So I was teaching mostly Intro to Philosophy and Ethics. And Intro to Philosophy can really be done in a lot of different ways. So can ethics. And I like to focus on key thinkers and texts and do things sometimes in a either thematic or chronological way. So what I did is I was like, okay, we're going to read these texts. They're all public domain. I'll give them to you students. And I asked, can I have permission to record these class sessions? And my boss, my chair, was like, yeah, I don't see any problem with that. Make sure you get a FERPA release, right? And there were some worries that, like, at that time, lecture capture, if you do it, then students will stop coming to class because, they already know they can just watch the videos. And again, the educational experts turned out to be completely wrong. As a matter of fact, students wanted to be in the class because they wanted to actually get to ask questions while we were shooting video or get to talk. It promoted discussion. And these became really invaluable resources for me because I could record the class session, and if students missed it, I could be like, hey, check out the video, right? Well, it's uploaded in your course management system. Or later on, when I was teaching the class again, I could use the videos as resources. And again, at that time, all I was really doing was recording an entire class session. I would plunk the camera down and just let it run. I wasn't using a mic, so the sound quality wasn't great, but it was decent, right? And again, I had the same sort of response. Now I was uploading these in my channel, and my channel started to increase exponentially in terms of views, in terms of how much time people were watching it, in terms of sharing, in terms of subscribers. I mean, it was slow at first because it was a small channel. And, I always thought, well, I'm kind of a nobody. But one of the cool things about YouTube is it's a big equalizer, right? If you have good content, people are going to watch it. I mean, they'll watch all the stuff that's high production as well, where they're spending thousands of dollars on videography, or where, at the elite institutions, they have people come in with big cameras and handle all that for you. But if you're a DIY sort of person like myself, you could break in if you knew what you were talking about and your audience, resonated with you in some way. And I like to think that my lectures are engaging and interesting, and that I know how to reach ordinary people. So, they were taking off, and I was getting the same sort of comments. Thank you for posting this, And then I started getting a different kind of comment. And this is what led to me changing things up. Hey, do you think you could shoot videos on this person? I know you've already got videos on this person over here, but what about this thinker? And so I did a kind of polling. And I found that the top 4 people that my subscribers and viewers at the time were looking for were Jean-Paul Sartre, Martin Heidegger, Georg Friedrich Wilhelm Hegel, and Herbert Marcuse, all continental thinkers. And so I thought to myself, I'm getting pretty interested in existentialism. I was like rereading a lot of the texts that I used to be into when I was an undergraduate and early in my graduate career, and I was like, I could probably do a whole series on existentialism. So why don't I do that? And I started finding empty classrooms, no longer just recording what I was doing in my classes, but deliberately recording videos about stuff that I wasn't talking about in my classes, some of which I would use for later classes, and those really took off. So existentialism, Sartre, Heidegger, but also Kierkegaard and Nietzsche and Dostoevsky and Marcel and de Beauvoir and Camus and Kafka and people like that, Shestov, fit into that spectrum. And then I thought, I do want to do Hegel. I don't know about Marcuse. Maybe I'll do him down the line. Still haven't done that yet. But with Hegel, I don't know that I can do these summaries like I'm doing. I should do the phenomenology of spirit because that's what most people are really into, although that's not the best place to start with Hegel. And I'll just focus on the phenomenology. Maybe I should do a close reading, line by line. Not skip anything, because it's too easy to skip over the hard stuff and say, do some hand waving. You'll figure that part out. No, let's do the whole thing. That's when I started the Half Hour Hegel project, this incredibly complicated thing that I thought would somehow only take me 2 or 3 years. It took me 9 years. Granted, I had some, other things going on at the time, but so maybe I could have finished it in 4 or 5, but it's still a lot of work. Over 370 videos in the series, roughly 25 to 35 minutes each, going through every single line by line, explaining it all. So that's another thing that I did. And that also drew a lot of attention. I just finished that up this year. So that's kind of a cool accomplishment. And then I started shooting another kind of video quite deliberately. Most of my videos by this time were around anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes. And the Half Hour Hegel was a little bit shorter, and I started thinking, I should shoot shorter videos on specific ideas or topics or issues or arguments or distinctions. We'll call those core concept videos. I've shot over 1,000 of those at this point in time, ranging from the pre-Socratics all the way up to 21st century philosophy. And I started doing those originally for my students in my classes, again, to try to help them out and make things more clear for them, providing them resources that they could go back to. And I was like, instead of like having them go through an entire hour, let's just say we'll do like 15 minutes to 20 minutes on this particular thing, and then I can link to it, and then it's easier for them to get into. So I started doing that, and those also provided me with the basis for the Sadler's Lectures podcast, where I just take core concept videos and edit the sound, make it a little bit better, take out all the filler words and pauses and repetitions of words, and create new sound files for them. Or I also use them in classes, both my academic classes, I use them a lot for those, and for open enrollment classes that I offer in the Study with Sadler Academy. So I started doing those, and by that time, we're talking about 2013, 2014, I was finding that my channel was growing considerably. And it was interesting, too. At one point in time, it looked like maybe I could even potentially make a living shooting YouTube videos. Now, that didn't pan out. The most that I ever made was probably about $800 in a particular month. It was increasing and increasing and increasing, and then there was a crash. And it wasn't because people weren't watching my videos anymore. It was because YouTube changed its algorithm and its payment structure. And a lot of people who had actually gone all in were like, holy crap, my business is floundering. I'm going to fail. How am I going to cover my debts? How am I going to pay my mortgage? And I was like, kind of glad I didn't get that big that quick and didn't go all in on this. And so it's always been kind of like a sideline. It's never made a ton of money, but it's always, a bit, and it's kind of cool that it's there. But it showed me that the videos could also be useful for other things. People would watch my videos and then be like, I want to hire you to be a tutor. I want to hire you to be a coach. I want to hire you to help me out with this. So the videos have been a way in which people got to know me and got to know how I teach about things and what sort of capacities I have. And I've built up a kind of ethos of being somebody who isn't going to BS you, who's going to give you the straight stuff and isn't going to worry an awful lot about glitz and glam and making things easy. I'm going to dig in and make things accessible, available to ordinary people and other people, professionals, academics, students, lifelong learners. And I won't talk about stuff unless I actually know what I'm talking about, unlike so many other people out there doing philosophy in YouTube. So that's how the channel really got started. And, I've added a lot of other things along the way, including these Sadler stories, AMAs, all sorts of other cool stuff. I could go on and on and on. But the core of what I do is taking ideas, mostly from philosophy, also from religious studies, politics, history, literature, a few other things as well, psychology, education, and, thinking about how I can help other people understand and appreciate and sometimes even apply those. That's what I do. And it all got started back in 2011, now at this point 12 years ago. Actually more than that, because it was the beginning of 2011, so almost 13 years ago. And if it hadn't been for me being involved with my fiance, Andi Sciacca, I'm willing to bet that I probably wouldn't have given it a chance. And my whole trajectory of my career might be very, very different than it currently is, where producing videos is something that I do nearly every day and have been doing for so long that it's become kind of second nature to me. And I'm happy that I did it. I wish it was a little bit more, remunerative, but it is what it is. And I've been pretty fortunate that I came around at this time in our development of technology where I could talk to people all over the world. And again, if it hadn't been for my wife, Andi, really egging me on, helping to overcome the initial objections, worries, qualms, and supporting me the whole way, probably you wouldn't be seeing me here on YouTube. So that's probably enough of the story. There's much more that could be told, but this one's already getting a little bit long. So let's call that the official origin story of the Gregory B. Sadler channel, and we'll end it right here.